On the agenda tonight, we're going back to 1970. We're going to be taking a look at David Crosby and Graham Nash, and they're going to be performing Guinevere. Hello, Phil here from Wings of Pegasus, and welcome to another analysis video. Following the sad news that David Crosby passed away recently, we're going to be taking a look at him and Graham tonight, as I mentioned in the intro. Thank you guys, by the way, for all of the messages requesting this video tonight. But let's get the guys up on screen, and we'll see how they get on. I am going to play this from the beginning, because there's a small part of it where it does relate to what we were talking about last night in the live stream. But let's have a listen.
Guinevere had green eyes like yours, milady, like yours. When she'd walk down through the garden in the morning after it rained, peacocks wandered aimlessly underneath an orange tree. Why can't she see me? Guinevere drew pentagrams like yours, milady, like yours. Late at night, when she thought that no one was watching at all.
I'm just going to jump in here. As always, there's going to be a link in the description below to the original video if you want to watch that the whole way through without me interrupting it. But the thing that strikes you about this live performance is how well Graham's voice blends with David's, because they've got very similar tones, and obviously they are singing in the correct way to get this smooth sound. You know, they're not kind of belting in chest voice, or one of them might be belting and then the other one in a light head voice sound. You've got this really nice blend going on where they've just taken their foot off the accelerator. But that's the point of this particular composition. It is set in that kind of mood, and they're just replicating this mood amazingly well live. The other thing that you can't let fly under the radar is that David here, with his guitar playing, you won't really notice it. There's a lot going on, but because he's playing and singing at the same time, you might not necessarily appreciate how involved the guitar playing is, considering as well that Graham, you can see that he's got his right hand and his left hand doesn't move. He's not playing different chord shapes here. So he's just giving this. he's just giving a little bit of drive, that percussive sound, by hitting those muted strings in the background, but it's very much in the background. What we hear is pretty much just all David's guitar and his guitar playing. So the reason that I played it from the beginning of the video is because they're just finishing the previous song, and David now has to retune his guitar, and that is something that I did answer in that question last night about the advantages and the disadvantages of having different tunings going on with your guitar. I did say that you have to tune up between songs if you have a song that's in standard tuning, and then different tunings. This, if you want to try and play along, you're going to have E as your first note, and then the A string is actually tuned down to a B, and then the next two strings, the D and the G, those stay as normal, and then your B string you tune down to an A, and then your high E string you tune down to a D, and it should give you that kind of sound. I think actually another thing that works really well is that David has obviously tuned this by ear, and it's ever so slightly off, and I think it might be that B string or your standard A string, but that might be a little bit sharp. I can't remember, but it's just awkward enough to give it something different, to give it a different personality, but not totally out of tune. So yeah, it's just interesting from that point of view as well, because I mean a lot of it can be described as, you know, discordant in places. And you definitely get that when you're talking about now microtones, which are, you know, sense sharp and flat. They are the gaps between the notes, effectively. So we've got a little bit of that kind of sound to it because it's been tuned by ear, but it really works well. This isn't going to be an instructional video. It's just going to be something that's going to hopefully add a little bit of insight into what's going on with David's guitar playing while he's singing at the same time. And I'm sure there are loads of instructional videos that you can check out on YouTube for this particular song and how to play it. So we're just going to look at, you know, a few pieces very roughly, starting with the intro, because with the change in tuning, it means that we get access to hearing two notes together that are just a semitone apart. So we have this kind of intro with the low E string, and then we go to the A string, and then at that point, that's where we have this semitone change. So we have so those two notes are a semitone apart, but because of the tuning, David can now play those two in unison and they can ring out so that you're not sacrificing the previous note. Because if I'm playing that on one string, which is how you'd have to do it in standard tuning, you lose the previous note now. We can't hear the previous note once we place on that little finger, whereas by, you now get them ringing out together, which is obviously really important because it does give it that unique sound of, you know, standing out and being a little bit discordant, like I said before. A little bit dissonant. There's something that sounds a little bit wrong about that, but that's the point. Another thing to point out is David's subtlety with his playing, because he's, in most parts here, playing really softly so that the vocal is nice and clear over the top, but it's in just the right place dynamically, his playing, and he's just doing that. I mean, in the intro, he kind of gets all of that to stick out, so that you hear all the notes that he wants you to. But then as we progress, you can hear that playing, dynamically, just being brought down, being more subtle. I'm just going to take it back to the verse so that we can hear this riff that's going on.
Guinevere had green eyes.
Just a mention about this vocal again, because it's great the way that you've kind of got this air in the sound. It's really subtle, and importantly, we haven't got any extreme vibrato going on here. We've got really straight notes, which means that pitch is now going to be even more important, because if it was delivered like Guinevere and there's a little bit of a wobble there, it gives you a lot more, room for error of not being hitting that note dead on. You can kind of include it in that vibrato, and because the note's always moving, you can't quite pinpoint exactly where that pitch is. As long as you get it around the pitch, then you'll be fine. But here, going Guinevere and not having any vibrato on there, you've got to be really accurate. And I love the way that they occasionally kind of lean into it and go Guinevere, and it's like that, so you can hear that leaning into it actually going back to an airy sound right at the end. So yeah, such subtlety, because you have to remember they're doing this in unison. They're both replicating this vocal style together, and that's why it works so well. One of them isn't singing Guinevere, too hard, or Guinevere, adding lots of vibrato. They have to be singing exactly the same way, and that's why it's so impressive, because the blend here is just spot on. Getting back to the guitar, because this is all going on at the same time. We've got this riff, and the subtlety of playing, it sounds like we've got that kind of thing. So the notes that you're aware of are like that on the first three strings of your guitar. Obviously we're tuned differently, so when I say your E, your A and your D, those aren't the tunings that we're using, but you know the strings that I'm talking about. But the subtlety is in the picking, because it sounds like that we get a little G there, so we have other notes going on at the same time during that riff. But it's all about the subtlety, because we might have that second finger and first finger on that right hand playing all the time, but you don't really hear it because it's so soft. So this is the point that we have, we're really aware of those lower strings and the riff. So when I put in the picking, so you can hear how it's just such a balancing act between how much of that second finger and first finger on the right hand you want to hear. Because when David's playing this, and again, this is at the same time as singing, he's applying all of this technique with the right hand so that it's not going, it's not like that. Because if that was happening, then he would have to be going Guinevere to try and get over the sound of his guitar being so loud, and just being dynamically in the wrong place and not suiting or fitting the mood of the song. And this is what it's all about. But let's jump back into the performance.
On the wall. She shall be free.
Even there, vocally, that is so difficult to do. We've got these staccato phrases, which means that they're not being held, these notes. They are very short and sharp, but the pitch is just bang on. And I love the way that we have that harmonic on the 12th fret. Just really cool sound.
As she turned her gaze down the slope to the harbor where I lay, anchored such a short day. Guinevere had golden hair like yours, milady, like yours, streaming out when we'd ride through the warm wind down by the bay. Yesterday, seagulls circle endlessly and sing in silent harmony. We both shall be free.
And there we have it. I mean, there is so much in this performance because you see this kind of thing done really badly all the time, where you've got two vocalists who are harmonizing with each other, but then they're not strictly harmonizing with each other. They're singing their own independent lead lines like you would have with two lead guitarists. And when you're playing the guitar, of course, you're always in tune, so it's never going to sound that bad unless you're hitting bum notes and you're in the wrong scale, in the wrong key, but it's always going to sound in tune. So that's why it works. Once you start doing that with a human voice, there aren't any frets on your vocal cords, so it means that you have to nail these notes, and that's exactly what we get here with Graham and David. When they go off into their separate lead sections, effectively vocally, they're bang on with their notes, and that's why it works. And you can see at the end the way that Graham reacts. They know that, you know, that felt good, we nailed that performance, and they absolutely did. Like I said, it's the kind of thing that you see done badly all the time, because there's nowhere to hide when you go off in a different direction. You know, sometimes you can be harmonizing with each other, or you can have a lead vocal and somebody harmonizes with you and they can be slightly off. Even the lead vocal can be slightly off, but your brain knows what's going on, so it kind of fills in the gaps. When you go off into a separate lead vocal, then your brain doesn't know the relationship now between the notes, so it can't fill in the gaps. So that's why, again, absolutely nowhere to hide vocally once that happens, but they don't need anywhere to hide because you want to hear those vocals because they're just so accurate. Another thing about this performance, but the composition as a whole, is that it's been given the freedom to flow however David wants it to, which is great for live performances. It gives it so much more feel, and when you break out having that restriction of having a drummer who's now setting the tempo for you, that's now out of your control, but we don't have that. This is all David. We have different time signatures going on as well, and even then you'll find that David just slows down his playing and just speeds it up a little bit, so it's really a living, breathing thing. Every performance will be different because the tempo will change, and it's all based on the mood of the performer when he's performing it. But it would take years to break this down from a vocal perspective, but the playing on the guitar as well, the time signatures, getting the right feel to it, just seeing exactly what David's doing on that fretboard, which by no means is easy to do, especially when you throw in the singing over the top. And there's so many cool passages going in there. We have this little rundown that was kind of like that, back into stuck into the riff. But all these kinds of changes, chops and changes, the light and shade that you get throughout this performance, it really is at a different level. But it only sounds this good because of the way it's being performed. This could be really, really bad if these two guys weren't so good at what they're doing. So, I mean, just an amazing performance, and you know, it gives you a bit of insight into what David is doing, and he just made it look so easy. Again, when we're talking about somebody who got out there and performed, David was one of those that was just constantly performing, collaborating as well, and yeah, just constantly giving fans the music that they loved. And yeah, very sad news that he has passed away. But like I always say, we've got this amazing thing called YouTube and just video that we can look back at and just type in David's name, come up with a performance like this. But as I said, thank you guys for requesting this video tonight. Given the last couple of weeks that we've had, hopefully 2023 is now going to improve a little bit. But I hope you guys did enjoy this video, and I'll catch you guys at the next one.